or I think it's national, custom brokerage trade forwarders. I've seen them, I heard them say it more often than other groups. They want to have an apprenticeship program where you learn from an experienced broker.
Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train one or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
Hello, folks. We're back for another session for Simply Trade podcast, and we have got a good show today. But I will tell you, if you hear my voice is probably a little bit lower than it normally is. I wound up having a little problem last night, so if I um, sound too low or I'm talking out of the bottom of a barrel, it's just I'm dealing with a little bit of lack of sleep, and that's what happens to me. But sound like a bullfrog with gastritis is what I always say. Anyway, but with that, I will say that we are gearing up. Here's come to the end of September here, and we finally have had some beautiful weather there here in Memphis. I don't know, how are y'all doing down there in El Paso, Lalo?
Yeah, same thing. We're consistently hitting low 90s and high 80s. So for us, that's amazing weather. So better than the heat. But
Well, it's been getting down into the 60s at night and in the mid 80s here in Memphis. So I'll take that anytime. So it's like a little bit about like paradise here. So anyway, well, I will say we've got a good show for folks today, especially if, for our listeners. If you are gearing up to take the broker's exam, you need to pay attention to this show because this is one that's in preparation for it. If you are somebody that has staff, maybe, or has somebody you're encouraging, you're mentoring, that you're gearing them up to take the broker's exam, you probably ought to listen to this on how to prepare and what to do, especially 30 days out before the exam, some things. And the other side of it is just even if you're a seasoned listener or seasoned trade person, is wouldn't hurt just to listen to get a little, go back over the fundamentals on some things. But Lila, why don't you introduce our guest? Because we have, I think this is going to be a good show today.
I think so too. So the previous episode, we invited Ruth Rodriguez before previously to talk about the broker exam, and that episode actually did amazingly well. It's easily in our top three shows of all time, and I can see why. The broker exam is one of those things that in our industry that is literally the only way that you can, I guess, not sanction, like you can like vouch for what you know, and how it's the only way that the government will do that anyway. There's a bunch of other certifications like from NCBFAA, for example, that have importing and exporting certifications. But as far as the government is concerned, where you're licensed by the government, that's about that. Not about that is the only way you can say I'm licensed by the U.S. government to be a broker, etc. So I can see how that's very popular. So
Well, also, Lalo, is when you become a licensed customs broker, the government officially recognizes you as an expert in as a expert in international trade, I guess, or in import export uh, compliance, especially on the import side, I guess. There's probably, Ruth would probably run circles around us as far as officially being able to quote that kind of stuff. But anyway,
but yeah, so we had Ruth on, and she talked about just the broker exam in general. I invited her again because I know we're coming up on about 30 days. The exam will be on October 25th this year. Um, And so I invited her and I said, "Hey Ruth, let's come up with I I'm not coming up with anything. She is. Can you discuss and talk about any strategies or tips for these last 30 days? A sprint, call it what you want. Like last chance workout, like they do, and whatever you want to call it. What are you gonna do these next 30 days to make yourself more be better prepared for the exam?" So that's she was nice enough to come back on and talk to us about those different strategies. So Ruth, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for the invitation. Love your podcast, and always got some good, interesting speakers on it.
Thank you, Ruth. Yeah, so Ruth, for everybody, she's from GRVR Attorneys. Um, she has her law firm. Her and her husband, Oscar, have a law firm in Dallas. But just as a quick reminder of what they do, and she also obviously has a a broker exam prep course that she teaches hundreds of people, and you can get that available through either Global Training Center or herself. But just let us know here at Global Training Center. We'll be more than glad to help you. But we're not here to talk about that. We're just here about talk strategy. So Ruth, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. And as you were talking about what we should call it, how about we call it 30-day challenge?
Yeah, that's
Hey,
cool.
there you go.
And for people out there thinking about becoming licensed customs brokers. And you're right. It's the only. There's lots of certifications out there, even some college degrees, but this is the only credential that the government recognizes because the government gives the exam. So, so this is way up there, and it's also the most difficult. Unfortunately, the most difficult of all of them. There's lots of certifications you can get. You can go through college. I think this is. I went through college. I think this is even harder than college, even though college takes 4 years. This one's just super dense information, and you have to learn the skills. It's more like a trade class. It's not like more like a college class. It's more like plumbing, or you really have to do the work. You can't just listen to somebody speak for 50 hours. You have to actually do the work, have them tell you do the work, especially for classification. You got to be somebody there, to have somebody there saying, no, you should do this before that you do that, or you missed this one thing in the index, whatever. It's very skill based.
And that's real interesting that you said that about plumbing or electrician or whatever. I've always thought that broker to be a broker, why is there not like an apprenticeship program for like being a broker? Don't you think there should be something like that? Because people think that they take the exam, they pass it, and then they become a broker, and they don't know maybe what they're doing because they never have done this. And I don't know. I don't want to get into like the politics of like setting up an apprenticeship program and all this and that. But I mean, it's interesting that you said that because all my life I thought so. There should be some form of apprenticeship program.
Yeah, there is a push for it. There is a push for it for, I think it's National Custom Brokers Trade Forwarders. I've seen them, heard them say it more often than other groups. They want to have an apprenticeship program where you learn from an experienced broker. I've tried to with my thousands, because we've there's about 1,000 brokers out there who have licenses because of us, the best custom broker course. But I've tried to get the people with licenses to take on interns, but they're like the liability, and they don't want to train their competition, and so it's always been a no. I pushed her for years.
I will. I will say that I've had a conversation with Cynthia Wittenberg after she left the government, and she's with GTEC with the NCBFA, and or the well, I guess GTEC is the conference NEA. Yeah. Anyway, NEI. Sorry. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm screwing up a 2-car parade right now. So anyway, that all said is, Cynthia was talking about doing an apprenticeship, and we're literally going to be looking at trying to do some of that, because an apprenticeship actually requires quite a bit of bureaucracy, and it's registered with the labor department and the state labor department, things of that nature. However, that said, one of the things I think would be good, I think it's really short-sighted for a company to look at it and say, "Well, I'm just training my competition," from a standpoint that you've got to, when you're working with somebody, you actually help build some loyalty, and who knows, they may leave and then come back to your company after they gain in some experience, if that's the case. But pretty much there's internships that are done, even from an internship, and maybe not a full formal apprenticeship, in teaching and training somebody how to apply the knowledge they learned in preparing for the customs broker exam into real life situations and where they go and things of that nature. So that's what the purpose of an internship is, exposing them to real life situations in business. Um, and hopefully they learn how to apply the knowledge that they're gaining.
Yeah, I agree. I think internships would help everybody, I think.
Mhm. Well, with that, so leading up to the last 30 days before an exam, one of the things I think you just mentioned is you need to be doing something ahead of time here. Should have been preparing. So before you entered the 30 days, what would your expectations of somebody that they have, you know, read some chapters or read the whole book as far as the regulations, or what? What are we talking about here?
So I have advice for two types of students. One is my students, the Best Custom Broker Course students. They have been at this for a few weeks, some a few months. Some started yesterday. That's true. But and we take students up until there's no cutoff. We will take students uh, whenever you want to join us. But for advice for my students who are listening, you already know what to do. You got to do the homework that I've been giving you, because we give individually tailored homework for after every exam that they take, and it's not homework for the week or homework for the new people. It's homework based on an analysis that we do. How did they do on this exam versus how did they do on the previous exam versus how did they do in the last 8, whatever. So advice to my students: do your homework, stay on course. If your homework has piled up because you entered 10 exams at once, you were not supposed to enter 10 exams at once. The way the course works is you do an exam, you get homework, you do the homework, then you do another one. But some students either don't get the memo
Procrastinate, yeah, yeah.
or procrastinate. Yes. So those people, if your homework is piled up, call me and I'll give you individual advice. Also, for my students, you need to come to classes. We have every week a 4-hour class. We also provide tutoring every single day. I don't know how other courses make it without tutoring people, because this is so dense and they test on such esoteric topics. And so we do 1 hour per tutoring per day. Students can sign up to 1 hour, but if you see, you're on at 3 and Jack is on at 4, you can stay for that hour as well. We have boot camps coming up, one in Ohio in September and one via Zoom in October. And then we have weekend study groups. So I would encourage my students to come to that. Now, advice for the people who are not in my class, who've been studying for months or for weeks, or just started yesterday. Uh, what you should be doing is take the 10 exams, practice exams, take them and timed the actual four. It's 4.5 hours now, but I still have my students do it in 4, so they can have a last half hour to double check the exam to make sure they answered all the questions, they entered the exact answer they intended to enter, etc. And then do some questions. Say if they skipped one, put a question mark, then they go back in that 30 minutes to go do the question marks. So do them in 4 hours. I know I had a student once who said, because when they pass the exam, they come back for to talk to the current students. And one said, I know Ruth said do 4-hour exams. I have a full-time job. I have kids running around. I set up my station in my kitchen. Sometimes I would do 10-minute exam of an exam. Sometimes I got the whole half hour. I never could do 4 hours, but she still passed. But if you can do the 4-hour exam in the 4 hours, and then review all the questions.
Let me interject in here. One of the things about, if you stop and think about it, folks, a 4.5 hour exam is the time you're allotted. So yeah, take it in 4 hours, because and with that, you're building up to that, because that's an endurance. It's sitting there for 4 hours, and you're going through and all that. You've got to work up to that scenario to be effective at that. It's like a marathon. So it's one of those things where you can't just sit down and say, well, let me just take the test and whatnot. You're going to discover that your mind wanders at times, your body has some issues. You're sitting there for so long and all that. So that's why it's important to, take these practice exams and gear up for it. So, you got to do what works for you. I mean, the mother that had, kids, family and all that, I get that. But anyway, would you agree with that as far as, practicing the exam? And part of it is lasting the 4 hours.
I agree. Then that's one of the reasons why I say do the 4 hours, 4.5 hour exam in 4 hours and practice 10 of those. Because if you just at the beginning, I have students who are just like, okay, I finished. I did pretty well, but it took me like 2.5 days to finish. Like, yes, anybody can pass this if you take 2.5 days or 2.5 weeks. The point is, can you pass it in 4 hours? You had mentioned another important point is body issues. If you, some people have whatever disability, there is an Americans with Disability that applies to you. And do not be ashamed. People are like, oh, I don't want to take advantage. This law was made for you. You're not taking advantage. You're not, doing something wrong. The law was made for Americans with disabilities. If you can't sit for 4 hours, or if can't, they don't let you eat in there. But if you have a condition where you have to eat every 2 hours, then you apply with it for Americans with disabilities. They give you extra time to do it, and you're entitled. You're allowed to use that. Of course, don't use it if it doesn't apply to you, but definitely some people, like I had one person who was in a car accident. She couldn't sit in a chair for 4 hours. She had to get up every 10, 20 minutes. So that person's going to take longer to do the exam. It doesn't make her less smart. It isn't going to make her less, not as good broker. She's still going to be a broker. She just needs extra time to do the exam. That's a good point. But yeah, it is an endurance. You gotta train for it. You gotta get ready for it. I agree. So also the 10 exams that you're gonna take, I suggest that you take them in different surroundings. So like that person had to do her kitchen, but if she could do one at the office when they're quiet cubicle, one have the husband watch the kids one day and go to crowded Starbucks to do it, or the next time do even if it's not going to be 4 hours, she can't be away from her kids for 4 hours. 30 minutes at the Windy Heart Park, so that when you get to the actual exam, whatever they throw at you is just going to be it's not going to affect you.
You've got to be able to handle or know how to deal with some things that could be possible distractions and things of that nature, so you can stay focused, is what your point is, right?
Exactly, yeah. And if you're always doing it at your quiet cubicle, then you go there and it's loud, the construction is outside and somebody's coughing next to you, and then you're distracted and you can't focus. So that's why I say do 10 different exams in different surroundings. Also, you got to review the questions that you missed. If you're in our course, we have recorded all of the 800 questions from the last 10 exams. And you can, if you don't understand, after looking at the tape, after looking at the answer key, why the answer is A instead of B, then go listen to the recording or come to tutoring or come to class, whatever. But if you're not in the course, then the Best Cousin course, then you would have to review the questions that you missed. And if you're stuck on one, there's social media groups, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. There's explanations out there that you can find, or just put it away. Some students, some questions I don't even understand, and I've been teaching this for 24 years. I have a law degree, and I've passed the exam myself 3 times. There's some questions you're never going to get. Even I would just say, I give up. I don't understand it. So don't spend too much time on the questions, but if you can, you should figure out why you're getting them wrong. You should also, in the last 30 days, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, maybe you're going through this, but I was just going to say, in part of the scenario in practicing and taking the test, is there are some questions that you need to look at. There's some questions you got to spend more time on. Case in point, the classification and things of that nature. Some require some calculations of values or figures or whatever. But the other questions are very, very short. So, do you look at, is there a methodology or something that as you're taking these is that you go through and answer, some of the short ones quickly and things of that nature, and then you come back for the longer ones or what?
No, that's how I used to. That's how I used to teach it when my pass rate was way lower, and I realized I've been improving the course for 24 years. So I changed my advice, and I changed it from what you just said to our method now, which is you spend X number of minutes. Custom says you should spend 3 minutes per question because 3 minutes times 80 is 240, which is 4 hours. Um, but and I see that advice being circulated all over social media. But our advice is different. The classification, like you said, takes longer. So why would you spend 2 minutes on 3 minutes on a classification question? You're going to spend more on those. And I have formula, and I circulate that to my students. But you do spend more time on classification than you spend on non-classification. And now, in terms of short versus long questions, I would not. I would not. There are some questions you're going to skip. For example, one exam there was everybody freaked out over these two questions that had the chemical equation. They had a picture of the chemical equation in the question, and people were like, "Oh, you didn't teach us how to do chemicals." It never had come up before. So we were freaking. We spent 30 minutes on that question. No, you should have spent 6 minutes on classification, 2 minutes on non-classification. Why are you spending 30 minutes? A question you just missed 24 divided by 2. You missed 12 easy questions by spending 30 minutes on that one. So, and I had a person later who was in the class and took practice exams, and he had a master's in chemistry, and he could only get one of those two questions. So those people who spent 30 minutes on these questions just wasted their time. So do we skip the short questions long questions, do the short ones? I would not. I would still do the 2 minutes on even a long question. Do what you can, because sometimes those long questions, they're easy. It's just they give you all these irrelevant facts, and then they ask you something easy, and you could get it in 2 minutes. If you do, great, answer it. If you don't, I train my students to have a physical Scantron sheet, 1 through 80, A, B, C, D, and E on each one. They put a question mark if they don't finish in 2 minutes, and at the end, that's when they come back. So if they have 5 question marks and 30 minutes left, that's 6 minutes per question. I do not automatically skip. I do not advise them to automatically skip them, because even the long ones could be easy. Just if you can't do it in the 2 or 6 minutes, then come back to it. And ideally, if you've studied enough, you won't have 80 question marks. You would have, 5 to 10 question marks, 2 to 4 question marks, depending on how much you study. You wouldn't have, because everybody's like, well, I don't know any of them. I'm going to put a question mark on all of them. Okay, because that's because you haven't studied.
Well, in studying, then I guess are there some just basic facts, should we say, that and bits of information that you just should memorize?
There's very little you have to memorize. Maybe the section titles to the HTSUS, maybe some chapters, the highly tested ones, maybe some highly tested CFR sections, maybe the MPF rate, the HMF rate, the maximum, minimum. But there's very, very little you have to memorize. Mostly is how to get the answer.
And that's where it's like going into, I guess that's in real life, that's what happens is that somebody will hit you. Here's a scenario, here's a situation, here's a question, whatever. And you've got to know how to research that and go into the regs and whatnot to find the answer, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So yeah, I think that you need to be ready. Like some people, when we were talking earlier about internships, one of the criticisms of our course, the Best Custom Broker course, is they don't teach you how to be a broker. They just teach you how to pass the exam. And I get it, I get it. But if you're smart enough to go through this ordeal and not give up and pass, then you can later learn how to do an entry. Later, you can do, whatever you need to do. You have the skills. You know how to research things. You know how to read the regs. You know how to read the HTS US. I don't think it's that bad to know how to pass the exam, but not how to do an entry. You can learn how to do an entry in half a day, 10 minutes. So it depends on who's teaching you and what kind of entry it is. So, but because customs actually ended up adding 3 documents to the exam, because I don't know if it's specifically because of the Best Custom Broker course, but because the criticism was that these people were getting licensed, but they didn't know anything practical. So they added the ACE entry documents. They added, back then they added SATER, but they don't test that anymore. They added ACE entry document, the right to make entry, and another ACE entry entry summary instructions. So that in customs view. Oh, and then they added these practical questions. They give you a scenario. Here's an invoice. Here's how would you classify this? What's the value on that? So they kind of tried to address that criticism but we still teach people how to pass the exam, and then people say, well, you just throw them out there. They're not ready to do anything. That's not true, because they're smart enough to pass the exam. They're smart enough to figure out. Also, we have, if you're part of our community, we have a thing called broker brainstorming. Every hour we sit around and ask each other questions like, hey, I've never done an FDA entry. Anybody has experience? And somebody will say, yeah, I've been doing that for 20 years. So we kind of continue with the education that way.
Well, and it's one of those things where you get a working knowledge of the regulations through taking this, and that's what you're striving for. So you can, let's face it, a lot of the things a customs broker has to be able to look at is what's going to be legal and what's not, from a standpoint of, transacting customs business. What should you or should you not do? Regardless of what your client says, is like, well, I want to be able to do X, Y, and Z. I want to take my goods and sell them to Iran, or I want to buy some things from Iran and bring it in. It's like, well, no, you can't do that. That's a sanctioned country. It's, as simple as that may be. But anyway.
Yeah, they are. I tell them that they're going to be attorneys when they get this license. They're going to be attorneys in fact. They're not attorneys at law. They didn't go to college or law school or pass the bar, but they're attorneys in fact. You're representing another company in front of customs every time you do an entry, or one of your 50 staff members sign and do an entry. They're representing a company. They're attorneys for that company, attorneys in fact. One thing I haven't said yet is also reviewing the 10, some people go back 20 exams. I don't think that's a good idea, because it's hard enough to do 10, because you're doing 10 exams. Say the 10 exams ago, that would have been 2018 CFR, but you're using the 2022 CFR. So it's already hard enough to go get their answer right if you're using the wrong book. So if you go back 20 exams, that's 10 years ago. The regs have changed a lot. The HTS has changed. It's just too frustrating. So I will only do 10 exams. But one thing I need to clarify or add is you need to make cheat sheets, because after you've done 10 exams, you'll see some repeat questions. and the answer needs to be in your head or on a cheat sheet. And you can't make a 500-page cheat sheet. It's got to be a limited number of pages. um, Important things that come up over and over. If you can't memorize them, then put them on your cheat sheets. You have to have that, or you have to mark up your book. But I do encourage people to do some cheat sheets to get through this.
So Ruth, from that tip that you're just saying right now, a lot of people are not aware that they can actually take in their little binder with them and have those cheat sheets or notes on there. Is that true? Or I believe I picked that up from you in the past. How does that work? I mean, it, what is it that you can take in? I know you can take your HTS and your 19 CFR, but isn't there like another little binder or stuff that you normally tell people that they should prepare, like other stuff?
Yes, so there's those two big fat books, and then uh, you should get a binder with three documents that are on the notice of examination. One is right to make entry directive. One is ACE business roles and process document, which I think is like 200 pages. The other is ACE entry summary instructions, which I think is, I don't know, 30, 40 pages, maybe less. But those three you need to take, plus then you need to take your cheat sheets as well. So I would get one. If you're a student of our course, we have two binders, one for studying and one that you're going to take inside the exam. And there's one or two things that overlap, but basically they're two different ones. So you need to take that in there. Now there has been controversy as early as April 2023 or October 2022. I can't remember which one, but Customs announced you can't bring any notes. You can only bring your HTS, CFR, and these three documents. And of course, there was an uproar, and they changed their mind. But be careful, because sometimes they throw that in there, and then they send that out to all the testing centers, and the testing centers don't get the memo. So you're told you can't bring in your books. So that's why I tell my students, print the notice of examination. So when you have to argue, because Customs doesn't give the exam, Customs used to give the exam, but now that it's electronic, they have to contract with a third party vendor to do it. And that third party vendor doesn't work for Customs. They don't know the rules. A lot of my students would come in and said they told us we couldn't bring in books. That's why I'm like, you print the notice of examination and say, look, right there, it's by Customs. There's their logo. They said you can bring in these things. So you can bring in your own references as long as they fit in the space that they give you. You can bring in as much as you want to, but I would limit it to those five documents. Well, 2 books and 3 documents. And I would limit the cheat sheets, because if you have 500 or 1,000 pages worth of cheat sheets, then that's another book you're flipping furiously through, going, I know it's in here somewhere.
And that's another thing you said. It now it's electronic, and I guess they allow you to use the electronic version of the HTS. But I know you're very, very opposed to that, correct?
Well, even Customs is opposed to it. They say bring your hard copy, bring your hard copy HTS and CFR, because they know how bad their system is. They provide it, but they don't recommend that you use it, and I don't recommend that you use it either.
Well, the other question too, what about the your laptop with the electronic version or digital version of your regs?
You can't bring it. You can't bring anything electronic. You can't bring in a laptop, a PDA, your iPhone, your smartwatch. You can't bring anything that connects to the internet, which is why. Where's my? Which is why we decided to go to SandTimers for the 2 minutes thing, because you can't bring in your watch, and there's a timer on the computer, but the computer is so unreliable. How do you know that the clock works on the computer? So we fought and fought and fought, and finally Customs agreed to let us use SandTimers. As long as it's small, this might be too big, but as long as it's small and as long as it's not glass.
Oh, really? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good tip. I never even imagined to go old school, you know.
Yeah, because
That's like,
you have to, because sometimes there's not a clock on the wall, And sometimes, the computer, I took the exam the first time they gave it electronically, and there was so many problems that I got out of there 11 and a half hours after I arrived. I didn't finish the electronic exam until 11 and a half hours later. So at that point, I don't trust the computer. I'm not going to trust the clock on the computer either.
So you don't. So since they've done it electronically, you're not filling in the bubble sheets anymore, then, huh?
You are. Well, let me see. Is it a bubble? I think it's a bubble. Yeah, it's still a bubble. No, it's not a bubble sheet physically. You're right. It's not a physical bubble sheet. It's a bubble on the electronic. But we still, like I said earlier, I still encourage my students to have a hard copy so that they can keep track of what they entered on the exam. Also, the place where they put a question mark on there. Also, the process of elimination I teach. So if you in 2 minutes can't get the right answer, but you eliminated A, B, and C, then you guess between D and E instead of just guessing. So I encourage a physical Scantron sheet, but yes, you're right. There's no bubble sheet, there's no physical Scantron sheet anymore.
Okay. All right. Well, now, well, I was just going to say now, with as you're gearing up again with the 30 days, are you recommending that somebody spend, so much time each day doing something in particular, or you're covering and you're trying to scan all of the information, with everything?
If I was so yeah, for student people that are not in the course, I would focus on classification. People say, well, it's hard to get these from the questions right from 10 exams ago when we were using a new HTSUS. It's true, but there's not many that you get wrong because of that. So I would say just a handful, maybe 10 in the whole 800, maybe 20. I don't know. I haven't counted, but it's still a useful exercise, and you cannot pass this exam without knowing how to classify. I had a student, or probably more than one, that tried it. There was this company that I was an attorney for that was in the middle of an audit. It was an aerospace company, and so they sent 5 people to become trained to become licensed customs workers, and one of them said, "Hey, I've been doing hazmat for many years. I'm just going to focus on the regs. That I've tried to understand classification. I can't do it. I'm just going to focus on the regs." Well, back then it was 60 regulation questions and 20 classification questions. In order for him to do that, if he guessed at the 20 classification questions, he would get 4 right. Just throwing darts at the wall, 4 right. And then he needed to get 56 questions right. So that's 90%, I think, um, 56 of 60. I used to be able to do math in my head, and then the aliens came for me. 56 divided by 6. Yeah, you have to get 92% on it's hard enough to get 75%. Why are you trying to get 92%? So that's not a good strategy. That's not a good strategy. If you just started, or if you're struggling, I would focus on classification. That's the hardest to learn. The regs you can just learn by doing 800 practice questions, but the classification takes uh, uh, skill and patience, and you got to have a strategy. And we have in our course, we have steps to answer classification questions, steps to answer trade agreement qualification questions, and steps to answer everything else. So you have to have a system. It doesn't have to be my steps, although I perfected our steps for 24 years. Don't have to, but you have to have a method. You have to be methodical about it, and you can't just like, oh, A looks good, I'm going to pick A, or B is the lowest duty, I'm going to pick B. Um, that's how people that don't have a license classify, right?
And I guess it's as silly as this sounds, Ruth, but when I'm training to run a half marathon or whatever, there is a like 3 months out, 2 months out, 1 month out, 1 week in, 1 week out, like diet and things that you're doing physically to yourself to, aside from the running, to like endure and get to the, I mean, I know it sounds stupid, or I guess silly. I'm sorry, I should we'll scratch that off, but it sounds silly. But physically, like, what are you doing? Like, are you telling your students like you should be, I mean, like, it sounds funny, but like loading up on carbs so that you can have more brain power, or
Not funny at all. It's not silly at all because um, I have I do when we have classes, and I do give advice like that. You know, you need to get sleep. You need to eat, especially the morning of. You have to have a really good, healthful breakfast. And I happen to be vegan. You don't have to follow my diet, but you know that sausage and bacon and eggs is not going to be a good breakfast for the morning of the exam. Get the whatever your definition of healthy is. Do that morning. You need to have a good meal. Also, when, like I said, I invite people to come back, and I learn from these people who come back and talk to my students, because I learn new what worked and what didn't. One of them said, um, Ruth always said, try to eat a good meal. I took that even further and just changed completely my diet. And I wanted to have the best chance that I could possibly have to pass this exam. So I researched about, better eating habits. And I did that for I think his was 60 days, 60 days. And it was just, they said it helped a lot. So yeah, get sleep, eat well, exercise. Oh, I also say don't give up exercise, because personally, when I don't exercise, I need 9, 10 hours of sleep. But when I get in my exercise, I'm fine with 6 or 7 hours of sleep. So yes, you have to cut some stuff out to put on this to add these study hours. But don't cut out sleep, don't cut out exercise, don't cut out healthful food. You can cut out, social media, TV, golf, or whatever your hobbies are, but don't cut out eating well and taking care of yourself.
That, well, and that's one thing, again, leading up to this, don't think, folks, that you're going to be able to, at the last moment, do this crash course and do these last little minute things and expect to, survive it. It's really no different than, in a sense of, as far as the overall approach, is if you're going to run let's say even a half marathon in 13 and a half miles or whatever, is uh, your body, you can't sit on the couch for all the weeks on end, and then a week before the exam start trying to prepare and all that. You're not going to last. This is something that you've got to build up to, build some stamina for your body. You've got to stop and think about it. Usually when we're working, we're dealing with something, we're in a meeting for an hour or so and all that, and we get up and get a cup of coffee, we take a break, we do these things. You're in this thing for 4 hours. So you need to be thinking about how, you got to keep your brain stimulated and stay focused and those kinds of things. And it doesn't just happen. So gearing up for the broker's exam or for any big project that you're working on, correlate this. This is real world stuff to where you need to be able to prepare yourself ahead of time, just like what Ruth is saying.
That's exactly correct. It is. And people also like, oh, it's 4 hours. I'm not gonna take any breaks, and I'm just gonna go. I need every minute. No, I recommend that you take 1 or 2 breaks, especially water. You need to be hydrated. Yes, you need to. There's consequences of drinking too much water, but just drinking enough water so you're not dehydrated. And bathroom breaks are okay. They let you do bathroom breaks. So just drink enough water. You can take 1 or 2 breaks, but you need to. Your brain will function much better if it's not dehydrated. So water is good. A good meal is good. And yes, training yourself to do that. That's why we do 10 practice exams. Very important. I do have some people who have purchased the course as little as 2 weeks before and have passed. And I have testimonials for that, written testimonials with their name. They're all on our website if you want to go to bestcustombrokercourse.com. but who have studied for as little as 2 weeks. That's unusual. Usually people study a lot more than that, but it has happened. One student told us that she was looking for a course at the with 1 month to go, 3 weeks to go, and everybody told her it would be unethical to us to sell you the course because you're never going to pass. Of course, we got her in, and she passed in 3 weeks. So it's possible those people are exceptions. Probably most people have to study a lot more than 2-3 weeks. But I do have 5 to 10 people that would say that they've done it in 2 weeks to 4 weeks.
So I guess being 30 days out, Ruth, it's not is it or is it not? Is it realistic to say, okay, I never really did the practice exams and I took it seriously. Ruth is telling me I should have at least 10 practice exams under my belt within these next 30 days. Is 10 exams still realistic? I mean, we're talking about 3 exams per week. I mean, that's 12 hours a week. You know what I'm saying? Is that too much? Is that going to be overload? I mean,
So no, it's possible. But people ask me, how much should I study? And I say, okay, there's two extremes. One person who has 6 months to go and they just finished a master's degree or a law degree. They love school, they love books, they're between jobs, they have no kids, they can study all day long. That person is going to need to study a lot less and pass the exam a lot quicker than somebody who got out of school 30, 40 years ago, hated school, barely passed, has a full-time job, plus kids and grandkids, plus a catering business, plus, an 80-hour a week full-time job. Well, that person's going to have to take the exam 2, 3, maybe more times. So if you can focus, if you have the luxury of 30 days in between jobs, it can be done. Even if, if if you don't, at least you'll get at least you'll have the 30-day experience. Now you know what your mistakes were for the next 6 months. So do those 10 exams, review those questions that you missed. If you don't pass after doing that, and then of course there's reading. I have a list of we do a lot of statistics in our course, like how many times has this subject been tested, how many questions are on this area, what chapters are, lots and lots of statistics that we provide. But one of them is called source list, where we take the answer key and sort it alphanumerically, and then we divide it up by subject. So there are 60 value questions and 110 broker questions. So then you can know where to focus your studying. So I would focus on read and focus on those areas that have been more highly tested than other areas. Did I answer your question? I think you said how realistic you said so it is realistic. And so it depends on what extreme you are in that area. If you're closer to the first example, then it's very realistic. If it's closer to the second, it's not. But it's not a waste of 30 days. You can still learn from those mistakes that you did on those 30 days and then adjust your strategy for the next 6 months. And start in November. Don't start in March next year.
right, right. Okay, well, we're running out of time here a little bit, but one last tip that I really like that you always tell people, and then I'll let you wrap up. And I don't know if Andy has any other words to close it out, but I really love when you say the night or the day before the exam, do nothing. Go to movies, clear your head, go out and run or hike, and just do nothing related to the exam. I really like that, and it's true. Just clear your head, because there's nothing you're gonna do in those 24 hours that is gonna really help you. I mean, is that not true?
I don't know how I got through college, law school, and graduate school not following that advice, because I remember pulling all-nighters for law school exams. Yeah, cramming and pulling all-nighters, and I don't know how I did it, and I did well. I don't know. I would not do that again. I do recommend that the day before. So on Monday before the exam, we have the best customer course will have a 12-hour hotline from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. There's tutors there, 2 tutors at every session, waiting for you to come ask them questions. And this is available for whether you're a student or not. It's available for the public. And then that's Monday. And then Tuesday, yeah, you should relax. Something you've been putting off, you haven't golfed as much as you want to, or spend as much time with the grandkids as much as you want to. Pedicure, manicure, facial, whatever you're into that's relaxing. Other than drugs and alcohol, do whatever you've been wanting to do that's fun and relaxing for you. And get a good night's rest. Get up early. Yeah, you want to clear your head the day before. You don't want to be studying till 1 a.m. that night.
Excellent, excellent. I do have one quick question regarding you're talking about reading. What about the chapter notes and section notes of the tariff? Is that something that you recommend going into and reading?
Oh, definitely. We have if you're a student of the course, you know the schedule. But if you're not, what we suggest is there's 22 section notes, 99 chapter notes, and 35 general notes. 156. So 30 days out, you have to read 156 divided by 30, which is 6 notes per day. So read general note 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on day 1, 7 through 12 on day 2, etc. If you're not studying every day, then do 26 times 7 is 42. Do 21 on Saturday, 21 on Sunday. So you can read all the notes before that, because in those 6 minutes, you don't have time to read 12 pages of notes. You should have read them in the last 30 days or 6 months or whatever you gave yourself to study. So yeah, reading the notes is really important. And I would just break it up a little bit every day. And you don't need to memorize or make cheat sheets or diagram or anything. Just read them, just like if you were reading a novel.
Okay. That's because on the classification, there's a lot of things that that you'll go through. And you're doing the classification, and there's the monkey wrench of the question in the section notes or the chapter notes or something in there that you need to be aware of. So it's that's how they trip you up.
They're going to give half of the questions that are on the exam, you're going to get wrong if you don't read the notes. Notes are very important.
Well, Ruth, this has been excellent. I will say, folks, if you are interested in her course and in finding out more or contacting Ruth Rodriguez, is we will have her contact information with our show notes. But this is one of those things where again, you shouldn't wait 30 days before to is like take the exam and go through it. Yeah, there's some anomalies where people may be able to do that, but this is a several month long ordeal and it's something you should plan for. But we've been kind of focusing on the last 30 days since you've been building a foundation of knowledge that you've been studying, you've been doing your work, you've been looking at things. Now you're coming into the home stretch, and so with 30 days out, this is one of those things that if you're going to be taking the broker's exam, we definitely wish you all the luck that you should have. But it's not really luck; it's the diligence of hard work and studying diligently and whatnot, and it'll pay off for you. Ruth, I thank you. And it's like, yeah, please do.
Can I add one thing? Is Global Training Center sells our course. The course is called Best Custom Broker Course. The Global Training Center sells it. And they have a discount that you can't get through anywhere else. You can't even get it through the Best Custom Broker Course. So go through them. They will call them, email them. They'll tell you about the discounts that are coming up. And I recommend them. Also, for people who are completely new and bomb the exam, even after 30 days that are doing everything, Global Training Center has lots of classes that are basic, like basic value, basic trade agreement, how to classify. You can take a lot of classes and then come to tackle the exam at that point.
We definitely appreciate that. I will say that Lalo is like you and your wife have built a great company and your team. And folks, if you are wanting a proficient staff in both skills and knowledge, check out Global Training Center. But also in this broker's exam course, this is something that's excellent. But overall, it's again the approach. Whatever training that you've gotten, if you're gearing up for the broker's exam, this is some good tips here just to the last 30 days to get yourself ready for it. So, Ruth, you have been outstanding, and I appreciate you coming on our show.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you both.
Thank you. Well, with that, we're going to turn it back over and hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you very much for joining us. SimplyTrade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show or would like to sponsor SimplyTrade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at SimplyTradePod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. SimplyTrade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by SimplyTrade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.